Hey, we want to continue our conversation, returning athletes to play during the COVID-19 pandemic. So some of the things that we kind of got going on is there's some differences in time away. It could be a positive COVID test where an athlete is in isolation, where they're have no ability to get out and be active. It could be a quarantine experience where an athlete is contact traced and put into a facility where they can still kind of potentially be active, be a little bit more creative as we're simply monitoring them. But at the end of the day, the premise holds true. They are away from activity. So we do need to take that into consideration when we re-socialize them back into training, whatever that may be. It could be initially coming into the weight room. It could be going back into practice. But there's some things that we need to think about as we're going through that. Today I want to continue our conversation. Last week we talked about planning, performing, and then progressing that plan. We talked about integrating the entire performance team together to create a collaborative conversation about one, athlete health and performance, but then two, coming together with multiple lenses so that a plan can be developed. You know, when different people come into this circle, we have the ability to have an integrated approach. We have the ability to understand the athlete, what he or she may have experienced or even missed while they've been away. So getting people together within that performance team is going to be crucial for this situation. I want to progress this today and go into the idea of why we want to think about going slow upon return. We want to review a concept called adaptation. So adaptation is essentially looking at an organism, in this case a human, in this case an athlete, having a baseline, and then over time we have a baseline, we apply a stress, that in this case it's a training stimulus, okay? And then what occurs is the athlete's overall wellness or readiness may drop for a period of time. So blue, as I add an outside stimulus, you know, a training session, a practice session, with volume and intensity, my overall readiness may actually drop slightly. Now, if what I can do is if we have positive behaviors off the field, off the court, away from the facility, what I'm going to have is recovery, and then what I'm going to see over a period of time is the athlete grow. Okay, this is adaptation. Now, I can have maladaptation. What occurs there is if I create this stimulus and I put tons of stress on the athlete and I do not provide ample recovery, I'm not going to have the inflection point go back up. I may have this go back down. Okay? Also, if an athlete is not prepared for the rigors of this stress, they may experience maladaptation as well, regardless of how much recovery we give them. So for us, bringing everyone into this conversation to be able to manage the application of stress on the athlete and then adaptation is going to be huge. Last time we talked about the idea of using some of our technology to manage this. We also broke the technology into two different types of technology. We'll simplify it down to clipboard metrics and then technology metrics. Clipboard metrics could be things that I'm just tallying. It could be on the stopwatch, but I can write it down. It could be contextual measures like minutes, reps, sets, even efforts. Okay? Could move into technology. We could look at overall distance. We could look at player load. Okay? We could merge the two and look at player load over minutes. We could look at distance over minutes. But essentially, we're collecting information about the plan that we've created. Last week we also talked about creating metrics that describe the athlete's response to the plan too. Metrics like RPE, or how hard the athlete perceived the training session to practice to be. Oftentimes that's on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe 1 is easy, 10 is hard. Okay? We talked about jump metrics. Maybe I'm using a measure like RSI modified, which is basically looking at the overall contraction time throughout a jump and then the flight time or the jump height. That's a measure of fatigue. This is a measure of how an athlete perceived the training session to be. This is an athlete's perception of or display of fatigue. Both of these are measures of how the athlete is responding to my plan. Those are two different types of measures. Okay, metrics that describe the plan: volume, how much volume, yardage, meters were in the plan. You know, how many minutes was the plan? Okay, and then metrics to describe the athlete's response: how hard did they perceive it to be? How is their fatigue or performance being adjusted? Okay. Next thing we want to talk about is the idea of integrating progressions, and this goes back to the performance team. You know, I have my strength and conditioning specialist in the room. I have my athletic trainer in the room. I have representation from a lot of different groups. I have my sports staff who's driving much of the conversation. But we're all coming together and we're organizing a plan and we're making decisions on how we're gonna manage this. And like I mentioned at the beginning, there's a difference between a COVID positive athlete that's been in isolation. We're going to have to make sure that we're following all medical proceedings. All tests need to come back before we're going back in. Everything that our physicians are recommending and requiring need to be in place before we do anything. Okay? Then we have an athlete that's in quarantine or a period of time away. But what we need to do is we need to provide an athlete with a dosage of stress to cause adaptation to occur. But we need to do it in a way that we don't give too much, but at the same time that we don't do too little so that nothing occurs. Okay, so this is where, coming back to our idea of planning, performing the plan, and then progressing the plan. Okay, so we have a practice plan. Okay, we'll just call this the 929 practice plan. And I have several periods on my practice plan. Same thing holds true. Let's say I have a training card for the weight room. 3-day split over the course of this week per se. This is the plan that I have in place for the athletes that have no return to play going on. These are the ones that are already integrated into training. This is the normal plan, we'll call it. The normal plan. Each of these has a set amount of volume. It has a set amount of volume that I've already prescribed for the athlete that doesn't have anything going on. So let's just make some arbitrary numbers up. Let's say this one's 10 minutes, this one's 8 minutes, this one's, let's say, 12 minutes, 4 minutes, and then 10 minutes. Within this same thing, this athlete's going to get 16 reps, this athlete may get 8 reps, we're going to get 20 reps, we'll have 2 reps, 5 reps. Okay, it could be a variety of things. There could be tactical work, it could be individual work, whatever it may be. Now, same thing in the weight room. Let's say I have X amount of sets going down through here, but at the end of the day, I have X amount of volume in that single day. Now, we all know that certain lifts are a little bit more intense than another, so full body lifts or compound movements. Maybe we need to take that into consideration, okay, as opposed to some of our auxiliary lifts that may occur at the bottom. Okay, we need to keep that into consideration. But what we want to do within this conversation is start to identify, this is the plan that we have today. This is the plan that we have today. This is the volume that's going to occur. Maybe like we mentioned, this is minutes. This could be reps. If I have GPS, maybe I'm putting down here estimated amount of distance covered, or if I've used it in the past, this is the amount of distance that I covered per this drill, or maybe I'm using player load, and I know that this player load equals 4.0 player load points per minute. I know I'm going to do it for 12 minutes, so that's going to give me 48 player load points for that drill. So I know what that is. I've measured it. That's what's going to occur during that period. And understanding that that's an estimate, but that's how we're using this metric here. Now, when we have our conversation with our staff, let's just erase our training card here. When we have a conversation with our staff, we're going to identify what's our progression back. You know, how do we recommend our athletes to come back? Let's say I put them on a timeline, with this being full integration back in, and this being their first day back to training. So we've come out of quarantine, and this is our day one back. That doesn't mean that I can't be involved in practice and training. It just means that I need to follow a stepwise approach, because I can't go back to 100, because we've already talked about adaptation and more importantly maladaptation and what can occur if I'm not prepared for that. So let's just say for us as a performance unit, we've identified that we're going to take 7 to 10 days, maybe 14 days if an athlete's been out an extended period of time. But let's just say over 7 days, we're going to take the athlete from 50% of all work within our normal plan and progress them back to 100%. So all we're going to do is take an athlete, let's just call him athlete A, and we're going to know that this athlete A in this set, day one, 50% is going to do 5 minutes. Maybe that's how I'm measuring that. Part of that drill, instead of the full 10-minute period, they're going to be involved in it for 5 minutes. Okay? Or maybe I'm measuring by reps. If I'm on my 50% day, I'm going to take athlete A through 8 reps. Or if they're on the 50% day in this period, I'm going to go 24 player load points. Okay? I know that I'm measuring it in player load a minute. Maybe I'm going to give them 24 player load points during that period. And I would measure that live via my catapult system. Okay? Over time, I'm going to go back through and I'm just going to progress this. Maybe that's 60, maybe that's 75, maybe that's 80. But we've all agreed upon this in our meetings. Last week we talked about progressing. Okay, so we talked about having a plan, performing the plan. That's day one. Part of progressing was debriefing, following practice, following the training session, and understanding how did the athlete perform. Were they able to achieve this during this period? Was it way too much? Was it too little? You know, do we need to adjust? What did they look like in 50% of the reps? You know, if they looked horrible and couldn't control their body in space, or they just didn't look confident, or maybe they just were not performing, were not in a physical shape to do that, maybe we need to adjust this slightly down. Maybe they crushed it and it looked great and they were really capitalizing on that opportunity. Maybe the next time we can progress this a little bit faster. But we're not going too fast because we understand the principles of adaptation. Okay? Now, imagine we have this. This is, in this example, this is integrated into practice. This could be an individual work in a drill. This could be on some more larger scale, full field work. You know, maybe where, let's say, go back to this reps example. If I'm working full field, maybe I get 5 reps because I know that's only half of that. Well, how am I going to make up some of that difference? You know, I know this is kind of uncontrolled, and I'm going to have some reaction work to this because it's tactical, it's on field, it's maybe working with an opponent. I can kind of continue to close that gap by employing some work with our strength and conditioning staff. These could be controlled runs, tempo runs, working low intensity work that's already programmed where an athlete's not really having to react to anything. So again, finding calculated measures to slowly bridge this gap. Again, it goes back to the plan. This may be an example where I look at total distance covered. if I monitor live, and let's say we complete the plan, and I know I needed my athlete to get to, let's say, 1,500 meters today, but he or she came at 1,200, can I find a way to creatively, without crushing the athlete, close that gap and get them where they need to be there? That's kind of how we're integrating some of this, some of our information we're collecting back into this plan. You know, I think at the end of the day, there's no rule book to this current situation that we have right now. You know, athletes are going to go away from training for a period of time. They're going to come right back. There could be a situation where they may have to go back. But if we can rest our laurels back onto our principles, in this case our 3 Ps, that's going to really help drive a lot what we're doing. Have a plan. What's our plan? We're going to drive this plan on the time of year. Last time we talked about our big annual plan and where we are on that, and then funneling it down to today and how that integrates in. This plan is going to be made for the athlete that has no or limited contraindications, and then I'm going to apply that plan to our athletes that may be coming back from a period of time. That's our perform. Following a debrief with our entire staff, we've got the whole staff together on the front end, and following this, we are going to progress or regress our plan to fit the needs of that athlete. At the end of the day, fall back on our principles. What is adaptation? How do we apply stress? And then how do we remove it and encourage positive lifestyle to see positive adaptation? How do we make sure that we're integrating this for a lot of different types of athletes? How do we employ everyone within the performance unit? And then how do we progress them safely and smartly?